Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine War news update. No, it's not, it's a Frontline update. Come on, Pierce, sort it out. For the 19th of January 2024. This reminds me, I've got twin boys, right? They're 13 years old, but since they were born, one's called Finn, one's called Oscar. And Mia and my partner do this. You look at one of the boys, you're like, your brain is like, that's Finn. That's Finn just there. And you go, Oscar, can you do... I know, like, and it just switches, and I know what video I'm doing, and and my brain, it just wants to annoy me. It's like, you're doing a Frontline update, aren't you? Okay, just wait for it. Hi team, welcome to another news update. No. Brains are just bastards. Right, sorry. Frontline update. Here goes. Okay, if you don't know what the lines on my map mean, jeez, what's going on? I'm not even going to show you the key to my map because I haven't got it ready. Anyway, you should by now. I'll do it in my next video. Let's go to the northeast, where, as you can see, there's no changing to my source mappers. Andrew Perpetua in blue, Surrey maps in red, and deep state maps in yellow in certain areas. I don't do deep state all up and down. These yellow lines are the fortifications. Right, okay. So the ISW says, Institute for the Study of War, American Military Think Tank, Ukrainian Ground Forces Command spokesperson Fitchio has stated that Russian forces conducted 54 drone strikes into Kupiansk and Liman directions, whereas Russian forces previously have not launched more than 30 drone strikes in a day. There have been lots of talks about how the Russians are gearing up for another offensive, either in the Kupiansk direction or the Liman direction, or in both. This idea that they are gearing up for something big, and they have some people getting a little bit jittery. Well, actually, there is a pickup in activity, certainly in terms of drone activity in both those areas. Russian Mill blogger claimed that Russian forces in the Liman direction are focusing offensive operations on the Bilharivka area and intend to encircle and capture the rest of the settlement. So this is to go down past the Kupiansk to Crimea axis, where there is activity still going on in a number of places, to the Bilharivka area, and to talk about how this settlement might be under a lot of pressure as the Russians are gearing up to take it, to encircle it. That's been the case for an awful long time, and there's not really been a lot of change there. We go to my sources for the area just before we go to that northeastern axis again. Just worth noting the Russian Volunteer Corps are still active. They've been working apparently in a Bryansk region, Suzemsky district. Russian pro-war telegram channels write that the RVC, the Russian Volunteer Corps fighters, shot a military truck. According to Russian media, 2 Russian soldiers were killed and 2 others were wounded. That is activity in the Bryansk region. So you've got Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk here. No, we don't. We have Bryansk up here. Sorry, Bryansk in that area. So that's much further around the border towards Kiev, really. Just looking for Sumy. Oh, there's Sumy. Yeah, so Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod. Anyway, I digress. So they are still active. Just worth noting that there are some geolocations coming out. Here's a summary of 3 geolocations. It says this OSINT chap, everything so far, more to come. They really want to push here. So this is in a Terny area where the Russians have lost a number of vehicles. And indeed, if we go and follow this thread, here we see likely shortly before this, 63rd Mechanized repelled a Russian attack near Terny in Luhansk. So just to remind you where Terny is, it is here by Crimea. Terny, and it's moving towards there. We saw that the Russians took quite a bit of land in one fell swoop, or at least it seemed to happen quite quickly. There's a little bit of walking back in that northern area from Syriac maps in red. I don't think that's a Ukrainian counterattack. I think that's sort of overexcited initial claims to gains. You can see there's quite a big difference between Andrew Perpetua and Syriac maps all down this entire front. And Andrew Perpetua is somewhat more conservative. Syriac maps very confident in those Russian gains, but Russians are taking huge losses. Now, it's worth noting that with a number of these geolocations, and we'll come to some down in Novomykhailivka, and of course Krinky is still difficult for the Russians. difficult for the Ukrainians as well. But when we look at the Russian general staff losses for every day, and I try and build up Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses, I try and build up this case that I think the Ukrainian stats are somewhat accurate. I'm not trying to build up the case towards this like desired outcome, but I'm just trying to work out, are they accurate? It seems that they are by the data that we have. And the last 3 or 4 days, we've seen a really big uptick in Russian losses, and it's trying to work out what is going on there. Well, actually, when you look at these geolocators doing their work, there is an awful lot of equipment being lost and videos to signify these losses. So here we can see at least 3 destroyed Russian vehicles neatly lined up. Let's just put this what looks to be a T-80 BVM tank, main battle tank for the Russians, on the map. And that is in this area, so right on the edge of where Surret maps. So again, I'm going to repeat myself, but Surret maps often changes mapping on the basis of like single humans or single vehicles or a number of vehicles being in a place. And as soon as they are there, he'll say the Russians control that area. Whereas Andrew Perpetua gets really annoyed with that and says, just because they are there doesn't mean they control that area. I mean, this is almost certainly a repelled attack, as is being kind of claimed here. Repelled a Russian attack. So you have a number of vehicles that are blown up. That doesn't mean the Russians control that area. It means they tried to attack it and were blown up by the Ukrainians and repelled, going back to where they started. So again, this is almost certainly what is underwriting Surret Maps' overconfidence, I think, in the Russian gains there. And it's more likely that it's a grey zone where the Russians are trying to advance, getting repelled, going back to their starting point and saying, right, okay, where do we go from now? And I think that's really important to note. So that tells us a couple of things tells us that about the mapping, but also, we are getting evidence of rather a lot of equipment being destroyed. I know this is just, 3 bits kit there in Turney on that particular one, but then when you go back to here, summary of 3 geolocations, everything so far, more to come. And then he's done a later post saying, there is more to come. So in other words, we're on the understanding that there's quite a bit of equipment that has been lost there by the Russians. Anyway, moving further to the south, it's not to say it's easy for the Ukrainians. They are fighting really hard to take out those, and they will be losing ground in certain territories. And here we can see the Ukrainians have been under an awful lot of pressure in the Vesely area. And Vesely is this settlement. It doesn't come up possibly because there are too many pins around it. But that is Vesely there. Let's see if it does. Yeah. So Vesely is this place. Now, Andrew Perpetua with a blue line says that there's a bit of grey zone. Russians control the southern part of it, or maybe even most of it, if you include this eastern area over here. Most of Vesely is under their control. Surret Maps has the Russians much further on, and in that area, Deep State Map are kind of maybe somewhere between the two. Either way, the Russians have made some fairly substantial gains here. They had been moving up this railway line back from Bilohorivka, which is another Bilohorivka, southern one, and to the west of Berestova. So they've been moving up there, and sort of it looks like they've been filling in the gaps. So we'll see, what the case is there in a few days. It's obviously going to be fairly dynamic, but they're certainly under a lot of pressure, the Ukrainians, in that area to the north of Bakhmut. Just to zoom out, let you know where we are. So you've got Bakhmut there, got the Soledar area here. And then to the north of that, the Russians, that's really quite a wide area of territorial gain, although a bit of a rejigging there along the way for Deep State Map. But if we looked for if you combine all the mappers, it's not to say all the mappers say this, that would be about 5.5 kilometer width of advance, but Surret Maps in some of that area and Andrew Perpetua in other areas, but nonetheless challenging for the Ukrainians there. And then when we come down to Bakhmut, the sort of main area of Bakhmut, some gains for the Russians in the Bodanivka. No, it's not Bodanivka. It's just north of Klishivka. Sorry. So some gains there. So let's just make sense of that. Both of these areas of Russian gains from Suryak Maps' own claims here. So in the Vasily area, situation south of Siversk, after the previous capture of the northeastern hills, the Russian army managed to capture the village of Vasily, with retreating towards the northwestern hills, where a series of fortifications represented in dark blue are located there. So these hills back here, I've said before that it's going to be quite challenging for the Russians to take this whole Siversk sort of front line there, or not front line, this whole Siversk region. I think they'll be up against it, but they are apparently, according to Suryak Maps here, making some fairly good progress at the moment. So Ukrainian army retreating towards the northwestern hills, where a series of fortifications representing dark blue are located. The capture of Vasily is the first Russian success of this year on a front that has hardly changed since May 2022. The next objective of the Russian troops will be the capture of the defensive line, behind which 4 or 5 empty kilometers where defense is complicated, moving the battles to a few kilometers from Siversk, which is heavily fortified. The Ukrainian command on this front has demonstrated a great defensive capacity, preventing, among many aspects, the impossibility of the Russian troops to recover the localities of Spirna and Bilohorivka. Yes, so that is to say that it's going to be difficult for them to take this whole area. There are a number of Ukrainian fortifications in there. Siversk is very well fortified. The ISW makes some quite a bit of comment on this, and we'll dip into it now. So I shouldn't really have jumped ahead to Klishchiivka. Sorry. Russian sources, including the Russian Ministry of Defense, claim that Russian forces captured Vasily, northeast of Bakhmut, on the 18th, but ISW has yet to observe visual confirmation of this claim. RT editor-in-chief and veteran Russian propagandist Simonyan claimed that the capture of Vasily is important because it will give Russian forces access to the T-0513 Siversk-Bakhmut road and open a new route of attack towards Siversk itself. Russian forces' prospects for conducting operationally significant offensives towards Siversk in the near future in near term are doubtful. However, Russian forces have held positions 9 kilometers east of Siversk for a considerable amount of time, but have not been able to significantly threaten Siversk from their current position. So the purported capture of Vasily, which is further away from Siversk than the other Russian positions, is unlikely to substantially aid a potential Russian effort to advance towards Siversk in the near term. The terrain immediately west of Vasily, and that Russian forces would need to cross to reach the T-0513 route, is additionally uphill on local tactical heights that Ukrainian forces currently control, which would complicate Russian forces' ability to advance. One Russian mill blogger claimed that Vasily is still a contested grey zone. However, Russian mill bloggers reported heavy fighting on the outskirts of Vasily and near Spirna. So this is the idea that the Russians won't find it easy to take Siversk by attacking from this direction. In fact, it's hard, and it's much further away than just going through Verkhnokamenyanska here, a lot closer than Vasily. So Simonyan saying this is the key to Siversk is somewhat overdoing. That's about 9 kilometers away in that east-west direction, and we're really talking from where they're making the gains at the moment about 14 kilometers. So it's a good deal of difference, and there's a difference in the terrain. So the idea is that it's fairly hilly around here, as I've shown you before, and that makes it quite difficult, as you can see, for the Russians to advance easily through this area. With the Ukrainians maybe having the advantage of the heights here where we can see, and then being able to look back at the Russians as they advance. So yeah, it's not going to be easy for the Russians. It's not the loss of Vasily, if that has happened, isn't anywhere near, I think, as important as some are claiming. And also it's interesting, it's coming from Simonyan and Russian propagandists. Is that being jumped on by Suryak Maps? What is the truth about what's going on here? There are definitely some gains here. We can see all the mappers agree that there are definitely some Russian gains. Does it include, taking the whole of Vasily, as Suryak Maps and Simonyan claim? I don't know. Anyway, a little bit more information on that, and sorry for jumping ahead to north of to south of Bakhmut, actually, to Klishchiivka. Before we go there, actually, on the Bakhmut section, the ISW says Russian forces recently made a confirmed advance northwest of Bakhmut. Geolocated footage published on the 17th shows that Russian forces made a marginal gain in the residential area of northern Bodanivka. And this is here some really great hits, according to Yakub Yonovsky of Oryx, actually, and now War Spotting. And you can... Actually, that's not... No, it's this one. Sorry. We'll come to what Yanovsky says. So the geolocation is recently the aerial reconnaissance of the 24th Brigade spotted an enemy flag, revealing the location of an occupant's stronghold. As a result of adjusting our artillery, the enemy position was destroyed along with the flag. And this is taking place in this position. So this might suggest that the Russians were in control of this position, but has been subsequently hit. So that is, right in Bodanivka, to the north, as mentioned, of Bakhmut. We'll reset that. I say this often with the geolocations of ISW, I don't think that suggests an advance at all. That's exactly where you expect the Russians to be, raising a flag there and then being taken out. Probably, I don't know, you normally kind of raise a flag when you get to the furthermost point, so you can say, hey, look how far we've got. And if they've raised the flag there and had it destroyed, I think that might call into question Surat Maps's interpretation of the Russian front line in that area. Anyway, that's just pure speculation from me. Right, and then as mentioned, this area north of Klishchiivka, the Russians appear to have made some quite substantial gains, I guess, all things considered, in that area, again, according to Surat Maps, who says the Russian army made new advances with the opening of a new axis towards the area north of the town of Klishchiivka. That, if it's true, might help them with taking the trench network, which I think is still contested, even though Surat Maps has them in control of that whole trench network there, just on the high ground to the northwest of Klishchiivka. Anyway, that is what is happening there. We'll move on down now to the Avdiivka area, where we can see a number of pins in a few places. Let's see what the ISW has to say first of all. Oh, no. Oh, God, I'm all over the shop today. I did want to come to this. Yanovsky, which is actually referring to Konstantin, who helps out a lot with Andrew Perpetua's live streams. He also provides footage. Well, he provides drones to some of the teams on the ground. He does a lot of fundraising for Ukrainian soldiers. He's Ukrainian himself, although I think he's not in Ukraine at the moment, but has fought previously for Ukraine. Anyway, some really great hits, and you too can help Ukrainian troops to continue this by donating money. Please pressure your politicians, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely correct. Sorry, I don't mean to disparage that. That's absolutely right. But this is interesting because it shows quite a bit in this footage, and it's very high quality footage as well. Like the clarity is HD footage. As promised, I'm posting the video about the Russian failed assault around Ivanivska in Bakhmut. The assault was repelled and many Ukrainian lives and lives of my friends were saved, and I can say that it happened thanks to you. Ukrainian troops have to conserve the ammo, and even VOG-17, that's automatic grenade launcher ammo used as droplets from drones, is scarce. However, because of our support, the troops have drones and make one round as effective as 20 before. The successful defense is also made possible by skilled drone operators and coordination between them. At timestamp 2 minutes and 5 seconds on this video, you can see an effective use of drone pairs. Two pilots wait for the infantry to dismount from the infantry fighting vehicle and coordinate drops to ensure devastating effect on Russian troops. So worth looking at that. Go and check out Konstantin on Twitter, and you can see that's actually in the Ivanivska area, which is north of the Klishchiivka area, just around here. So possibly even in the area that Surat Maps is claiming as to be a Russian advance. So anyway, if they are advancing, they are taking some losses there, as according to that footage. Right. In the Avdiivka area, and sorry to flit around so much today, just read out what the ISW says. Russian forces likely in the Avdiivka direction are actively using armoured vehicles to support and deploy dismounted infantry, and these tactics have led Russian forces to lose 41 armoured vehicles, including 17 tanks, in the area in the past 3 days. So this is, again, a return to the idea as to whether the general staff figures are verifiable. The claims are, in this area alone, the Russians have lost 41 armoured vehicles. And that fits in with what the general staff have been saying over the last 3 days. Really high losses across the front line. And this is one of the main areas. We have seen Footage of columns attacking in the area by the water treatment plant here, just to the east of the Terracon, the slag heap there. The Russians have come down in 3 columns. They did that about 3 days ago, and they lost a lot of vehicles there. But there could also be a number of places where they're losing vehicles. I know it's quite active around the Pervomaisky area. We see some gains down in the southeast by the industrial zone, as according to Surat maps and a little bit of deep state maps there. So some gains for the Russians in that area. Surat maps here saying that the Russian army began the assaults towards the last positions of the Ukrainian army in Vinohradniki area. There are reports that Russian troops already captured the first trenches. However, this needs confirmation. So far, only part of the railway beyond 2014 line was taken. After this summer cottage area, only Tsarka Ochota remains as the last defensive stronghold south of the city of Avdiivka before moving the battles into the first neighborhoods. Okay, so that's this area. There's a restaurant there. This is the idea that the Russians are making some gains here across the original 2014, that purple line further on there. And if they take this area, then it's only Tsarka Ochota. Here there's a restaurant and I don't know, some kind of complex there where I think there's some fairly decent Ukrainian defenses. I know that these forests have fortifications inside them, trench lines and whatnot. So although, the claim might be this is the last area before they're fighting in the suburbs, actually I don't think it's easy to say as that. I think there's much more chance of the Russians going through the industrial zone and reaching the dachas via there than going through the forests down here, where I think they'll find it much more difficult, which is hence why we have seen not a lot of change in the mapping in this area for some time. It's all been about the industrial area just to the north there. Right. Anyway, yes, so they lost 41 armored vehicles in the last 3 days. Ukrainian Tavrisk spokesperson Stupin noted that Russian forces typically use one or two tanks, several armored personnel carriers, and MTLBs, so those are tracked armored fighting vehicles, to transport infantry before withdrawing quickly, upon which Ukrainian forces strike the armored vehicles. So they try and do this by troop, really, by foot infantry, but they need to drop them there, so they get the infantry there and then hot-foot it out of there. But they just end up getting hit on the way there or on the way back and just lose large amounts of equipment. And, they don't seem to have any other way of doing things, really needing to effectively combine artillery with aviation. But of course, aviation is a bit hit and miss at the moment with regard to strikes on their own aircraft, strikes on radar. Then you've got a lack of artillery compared to what it was a year ago. You've got counter-battery fire being pretty effective, and you've obviously got minefields and ATGM crews and Ukrainian artillery and mortar crews that, although they're suffering for ammunition, they are still effective, and it just makes those kind of maneuvers by the Russians very difficult. If you're not flattening the place first with aerial bombardments, then it means you're gonna find things difficult. Right, in the area around Pervomaisky, we can see that actually possibly some rejigging in favour of the Ukrainians in one area of the front line by Surat maps, and then some gains in Pervomaisky and indeed on the way towards Novelsky as well for the Russians there. Let's have actually, I don't know that we have a map for this. No, there's nothing released by Surat maps to illustrate that. We do have no reports saying in that southern area, southeast by the industrial area, the Russians are making minor gains. They took full control over the industrial area, and while making the way into the private sector via the O0542, the entrance is still contested. North of Avdiivka remains unchanged. In other words, they're moving into that dacha area via that way rather than through the forests, as I indicated would be preferable. Now, when it comes to losses, again, it's just worth mentioning some other geolocators here. And of course, you can look at all the video evidence for this. I mean, just look at that road there. Look at the number of vehicles and smoking vehicles there. So anyway, The AFU 79th Air Assault Perun drone group video repelling Russian assaults at Novomykhailivka some days ago. Locatable Russian losses. You've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So you've got 13 vehicles all listed, mainly infantry fighting vehicles and APCs type things rather than any tanks, but just a lot of vehicles. And those vehicles are arguably going to be full of troops as they attack. So we're going to come on down past Mariinka onto Novomykhailivka. Let's just put some of these on the map to see where they are losing these vehicles. And yep, it's quite far down to the south here, as indicated by that geolocation. Let's just randomly pick another couple to see if they pop up anywhere else other than that area. Yeah, a little bit further to the north there. And let's get this MTLB. This is a tracked APC or tracked. Yeah, it might be seen as infantry fighting vehicle. Yeah, I think is that in that same area. It appears to be in pretty much exactly that same area. The final one will be this BMP-1. And we'll see where that is. I didn't like that because I've got BMP-1 on the end. There we go. And that is all much further to north. So that could be from a few days previously when they were assaulting up here, and then they've been pushed back. The Russians have been pushed back and pushed back. So a lot of losses in this general area, something we have known about, but geolocated losses confirming that the Russians really have taken a bit of a beating in terms of equipment in the Novomykhailivka area. And that then suggests that what the General Staff claim is at least in the right direction in terms of Russian losses. Okay, then we return to the Institute for the Study of War, and there's not really a lot more to mention. There is something near Velika Novosilka, which is unusual. We don't usually hear a lot about this area. So there's geolocated footage published on the 18th showing that Russian forces previously marginally advanced southeast of Rivnopil, which is southwest of Novomykhailivka, but it's unlikely to be a recent advance, to be perfectly honest. So let's go to that now. Geolocation is here. So the 1st Separate Mechanized Brigade is working on Russian positions southeast of Rivnopil. And these Russian positions are here, obviously being hammered by the Ukrainians in this video. But whether they are still holding on to those positions or whether the Ukrainians are able to push them out, were able to push them out, I don't know. But it doesn't really show advances. It depends what your mapping is. Maybe marginal advances as far as Andrew Perpetua is concerned. Sits inside what is claimed by Suryat maps. I guess we'll look at the last one, see if that shows any different location. And then we'll move on to the Krinky area after that. Yeah, so that's within what we already know. So what we'd expect given where we think the Russians presently are, as according to actually both the mappers there. So, okay, activity taking place in Rivnopil in the Velika Novosilka area. So there is still fighting going on. There's still drone activity. Nothing to really report in the Robotina section here, as according to the Institute for the Study of War. So we're now going to come down to the Krinky area. Now, a couple of things to say about here. No changes to the mapping is the first thing to say. There's been this idea that the Russians have really pushed the Ukrainians back, as according to Suryat maps, and Andrew Perpetua has not changed his mapping, but to be fair, he already had the Russians further forward than Suryat maps originally did, or previously did. And that fighting is basically ongoing inside Krinky a lot. So what was underwriting, I think, the Suryat maps' last Russian advance was this claim to there being a flag in the middle of Krinky. From what I understand, there was an attack. They put up a flag and then it got blown up almost straight away. But that putting up the flag in Krinky had given a lot of people pause for concern, or pause for joy, depending on which side they're on, thinking that the Russians had actually robustly taken control over a lot of Krinky. I don't know that that's at all true. It is going to be difficult, and there are fights, incursions into the streets. There's just a lot of fighting going on. It's pretty much destroyed. I've seen some video evidence of Krinky, and it reminds me somewhat of Klishchivka and other places where they just absolutely flatten them. This will be largely flattened because it's the front line, and both sides are trying to push the other side out of it. And so you've just got mortar, you've got aviation, you've got artillery, you've got drones just smacking the heck out of it on a routine basis. Actually, we'll go to the ISW first. Geolocated footage published on the 18th shows that a Ukrainian HIMARS strike destroyed a Russian electronic warfare system in Novokakhovka. So just thought I'd throw that in there. It's vaguely nearby, but that's a high-value electronic warfare system being hit in Novokakhovka by HIMARS. So you're guaranteed it's pretty high value if you're going to expend a HIMARS missile on it. And that was taken out. And of course, it's all about the fight for control of the air around here and the control of the airwaves in the sense of electronic warfare is so important. Each side trying to get their drones to work with impunity, and you need to just establish a real electronic warfare advantage. War Translated here says Ukrainian defense forces liquidated one of the most effective Russian FPV drone operators with a call sign Moses in Krinky. This is reported by several pro-Russian channels, referencing a message that appeared on his wife's channel, or Moses' channel, sorry, posted by his wife. I reported this earlier today, and it's the claim that that the Ukrainian drone operators have destroyed a house with the Russian equivalent of Magyar, and possibly his team as well. This has been really well received by the Ukrainians. Lots of talk about this, that this Moses chap has been eliminated, and that his drone team, or at least some capabilities, have been degraded. And actually, where is it? Yeah, we come further down. Here it is. So that burning house there, it was this house that you could see them go into. Obviously, what they do is they sit and watch for a while to work out what's going on and who is using what place. And then once you have ascertained that actually it's a high value target, that these guys are a drone team and actually a really decent drone team, then you're like, right, then we need to take it out, and then it goes, and that has been destroyed by the Ukrainians, and that is apparently I was just looking for a geolocation of it exactly, has been a very high value strike for the Ukrainians. Yeah, no, I can't see. Oh, here it is. Brilliant. So we'll take that. So that's the geolocation of the house. Be interesting to see how close to the activity this is. Now, there's talk about, if you take out electronic warfare systems like the one in Novokakhovka, it means you might have to be operating much closer to the front line than you otherwise like. So actually, this is to the west or the southwest, a fair bit away from the fighting. Let's see what that is. That's about a 2.5 kilometer distance from fighting. So that's the house that was blown up, and the team that was lost, or at least the leader that was lost there, will be a sore loss for the Russians. Right. Other than that, not too much to report in terms of Krinky. The ISW goes on really to talk about what's taking place with the A-50 and the Il-22. So Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Ignat stated on the 17th that Ukraine's recent destruction of the Russian A-50 long-range radar detection aircraft and the Il-22 airborne command post aircraft has temporarily degraded Russia's air operations over the Sea of Azov. Ignat stated that only 1 or 2 Russian planes currently patrol the Sea of Azov, and that Russian forces previously flew 2 A-50s near the sea in conjunction with an Il-22, as well as a third A-50 in eastern Ukraine. He noted that Russian forces will adapt to the loss of these aircraft. However, as we've seen previously, when, say, the Su-34s were struck in this area and the loss of a few planes in the Mariupol area, we saw the Russians adapt, not doing so many aviation strikes, and then sort of getting the lay of the land, ascertaining whether that air defense system that attacked the aircraft has moved, and then you start sort of operating as per normal again and waiting for the next disaster to unfold. all the while, of course, exacting quite a toll on the Ukrainians with their aviation bombing of cities and towns and military targets and whatnot. So, yeah, they will pull those A-50s back or change their behaviour until, I guess, they get back into a regular zone, if you like. Okay, that's the Frontline update for you for today. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. Thank you so much for the valuable conversations you have on a daily basis in the threads. There's an amazing community of people. I really do think you are awesome. I don't know of any other Telegram. I don't even use Telegram, really. Any other YouTube thread, any other YouTube channel that has the fabulous people that I have here. I'm so honoured to have you guys along for the ride. So thank you so much. Take care. Anyway, speak soon.